Welcome to Beauty Confidential, Conversations from the Lounge, the place where unscripted conversations meet the real behind-the-scenes experiences of the beauty industry. I'm your host, Krystina Wilson, and we talk about the real work that goes into all of the stages of product development in the beauty industry, from detailed briefing to raw material innovation, legal and regulatory support, trends, devices and technology, and everything in between. We talk about the boxes that need to be checked before a product ever reaches the shelf and the fires that inevitably need to be put out along the way. So get comfortable, grab a seat, and let's get the conversation started. Welcome to the lounge.
This episode of Beauty Confidential is brought to you by Creative Solutions Consulting, the beauty industry's behind-the-scenes powerhouse. From packaging engineering and product development to supply chain strategy, compliance, and operational guidance, Creative Solutions Consulting partners with brands to bring thoughtful, high-performance products from concept to shelf. Whether you're launching, scaling, or rebranding, we help you build beautifully and intelligently. Learn more at creativesolutionsconsulting.com.
Right now, the beauty industry, like many others, is going through a shift. We are seeing layoffs, restructures, and a lot of really incredibly talented people facing uncertainty about what comes next. I wanted to create this episode as a real, honest conversation about one path that often is considered during times like this: stepping out on your own and building a consulting business. This isn't a quit your job and everything will work out kind of conversation. It's about the reality, the opportunities, the challenges, the mindset shifts, and what it actually takes to build something sustainable on your own. I'll be sharing my personal experience launching Creative Solutions Consulting, what worked, what didn't, and what I've learned along the way, in the hopes that it gives you clarity, perspective, and maybe even the confidence to explore what's possible for you. Whether you're actively considering consulting or just curious about what it looks like behind the scenes, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the lounge. Hello. This week's episode, we are going to be talking a little bit differently about the industry. I wanted to share with you, given a lot of what I'm seeing on LinkedIn and happening in the industry, whether it's driven originally by the impact of COVID or the tariffs, and brands are just reacting to what's happening globally and also in the industry. I wanted to take a moment to really talk about how the industry is impacting us as people who are passionate about the beauty industry, beauty and wellness and skincare. I've noticed a lot of really incredible people have been navigating layoffs and brand restructuring, and just really a lot of uncertainty around that. And I wanted to share a little bit about my experience as it applies to that and really where consulting became a consideration for me. So I've been in the industry since 2014. Before I joined a brand, I was a licensed esthetician. And really to kind of take it back, even before that, I was a stay-at-home mom for a good portion of my life, raising kids. And so I was out of the workforce. I had the opportunity to receive a facial from a friend, and her daughter was going to aesthetic school. And when you're a student, you have the opportunity to practice on family and friends at either no cost to the family or friend, or at a reduced cost. So I took advantage of that, fell in love with facials, receiving facials, and really fell in love with the technique a bit. And so I enrolled in aesthetic school, did that, became licensed. While I was going to school, I just fell in love with it. And I feel like I've always been like an entrepreneur at heart, anyways. Always kind of have been like starting my own businesses. Even when I was a stay-at-home mom, I had like a little bath and body recipes made from home kind of business. And I did like little home shows and things like that. So it's kind of always been in my blood. And so while I was in aesthetic school, I knew that I wanted to open my own day spa. And so I wrote my business plan while I was in school and approached some commercial leasing companies. I was really blessed to be able to find an opportunity with Kimco Realty where they were running a program at the time to really support new businesses. And I was able to take advantage of an incredible program that they were offering that allowed you to essentially, if you qualify, to be able to start your business, have, a brick and mortar at one of their locations. And so that program was about I think it was a 3-year program. Your first year allowed you to not have to pay rent at all. We just had to pay like parking lot fees and utilities and things like that, but we didn't have to pay actual rent. And it was an opportunity for us to build our clientele and get under our feet a little bit because the first year to 3 years, you're operating in the red. So it was going to give us an opportunity to do that. At the 1 year mark, we were going to be given an opportunity to decide to move forward with the next 2 years under the the structure that they had created, or to kind of pull out, depending on how the business was doing. And so at the 1 year mark, we're kind of building up to it. We kind of looked at the financials and decided that based on the financial structure that the leasing company had created for us, it was not going to be in our best interest to move forward with an extended contract. So I ended up pulling out of that and kind of moved into my own studio, continued to offer my services under that studio for a little while, and then decided then I was growing my family at that time. And so decided I needed something that was going to provide a little bit more financial structure for me. So I applied for a position with a brand who graciously hired me on as their assistant to project manager. And that really was the gateway for me to be able to build on my experiences, on my knowledge in the industry, understand how brands are born and how they're built really from the ground up. So this brand had been established for probably 5 years, I want to say, maybe even a little bit longer, and so I stepped in. There were probably maybe like 15 employees there at the time. Everybody was wearing, multiple hats, of course, as you do in startups. But it really gave me an opportunity to learn so much. And I remember one of the thoughts that I had and really how I set my mindset was knowing that my title was assistant to project manager, but I never really settled into that so much as like, understanding that it was a startup company essentially, and everybody was going to need to be flexible and wear multiple hats. I was really open to that. And so in my time there, so I was with that company for a good maybe 7 years or so, learned a ton of really like priceless lessons and experiences. I walked away from that role. I had started as an assistant to the project manager, eventually became the project manager, and then eventually I became a packaging engineer for them as the brand grew. But I learned a ton about product development. I worked directly with contract manufacturers. I did a ton of sourcing with fragrance houses and played a key role in formula approvals, fragrance approvals, really reading and understanding ingredient listings, marketing sheets, and ensuring that if we wanted to use an ingredient at marketing level or efficacies, that I understood how to read those ingredient listings and the QALs, learned a ton about logistics and supply chain, and then, of course, packaging across the board. Really enjoyed working directly with packaging partners and then also working with brokers and really understanding the benefits of both of those types of relationships. A time came when I needed to make a choice, right? Like I was doing everything in product development from like helping to get formulations dialed in, and also packaging. And it was just a ton. It was like so much. It was so much work. And so the time came when I really was faced with the option to choose one direction or another. And it was really difficult for me because I loved both, right? Relationships are so important to me. The relationships that I have with my vendors and my suppliers are so incredibly important to me that it was hard for me to choose. But my heart was really kind of in the packaging. If I had to make a choice, it was probably more in the packaging. And because of that, I took opportunities to really grow in role, because everything I was learning was through experience, right? Like, to be honest with you, I do not have, a college education and a college degree, but I know a lot about a lot of things. And that's because I never was somebody who, like I said, settled into a particular title. If something needed to be done and I was asked to do it, I did it. It was an opportunity for me to learn to do something new. And so I never said no, which, there are pros and cons to that too. But I think because I was in the mindset that I just wanted to learn everything and I wanted to learn as much as I could. I just really wanted to be a sponge in the industry, that I just took every opportunity to do that. And in doing that, I approached this particular brand about allowing me to get some certification courses under my belt when it comes to packaging. And I was so grateful that they said yes to that, because it was a pretty hefty price tag for a single mom. So that was a huge blessing for me. And it really allowed me to get some real, like, solid education under my belt, which I really appreciated. And then, so eventually I moved on from that particular brand and joined up with another brand that was really going to give me an opportunity to expand my knowledge and my portfolio, right? So with this original brand that I was working with, they were an OTC SPF company, really focused on the SPF and the sunscreen protection aspect, while also focusing, of course, on skincare. But this other brand that I transitioned over to was also not so much on the OTC side, more on the skincare side, but they were going to be expanding into color cosmetics, which I did not have any experience in. So I thought about how that would work for me in my experience and also as part of like my portfolio of knowledge. So I moved into that role and absolutely loved it. Learned a ton about the industry and how other brands operate, and really walked away feeling very satisfied. Now, with a lot of what happened in COVID in 2020 and how things affected the industry, all industries, to be honest, I started to see layoffs happening. Not only was I seeing them in the brand that I was with, but I was kind of seeing them all over LinkedIn. Was hearing about them from colleagues who were posting that they were now looking for work because they had been laid off or their brand was restructuring or whatever was happening, right? This was happening not only with brands, but also with suppliers. And so I started to like have some feelings of nervousness, wondering if my name was going to come across that block eventually. I made it through probably 2 or 3 layoffs where I was not directly affected. But last year in 2025, at the very end of April, I saw an invite come across my calendar. And it was an invite from my supervisor with no context, which of course made me nervous. And I wasn't sure what was happening. It came across my calendar almost first thing in the morning, probably at about 8:30, and it was a meeting set for about 9:30. It was only about like 20 minutes long. So it was like all these things are coming into my mind, like, oh, okay, is today the day of getting laid off? Like, what's happening? And I remember, so I am a woman of faith. So I remember preparing to dial into this call and saying a prayer and just being okay with the fact that whatever was about to happen, whether it was good news or not so good news, that I knew that I had done everything right. I knew that I had been doing a fantastic job. We had had our annual reviews like a few months prior, maybe even a month prior. And I had received fantastic feedback. I had even received a raise. So I knew that whatever was happening wasn't about my work performance, it was probably likely to be more about restructuring and that they had taken a moment to review everything and they were going to be downsizing for whatever reasons they wanted to do that. So I remember saying this prayer before I dialed into this call. And I dial into the call and it's my supervisor and HR. So I knew exactly what was about to happen. And I have to tell you, there was a part of me that was, to be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised, but I also saw it as an opportunity. And because if I take you back about a year prior to that, I had really been just like loosely considering stepping out and doing consulting because I feel like I was able to accumulate so much knowledge in this industry, so much information. I had built my network out, which I had been very intentional about doing was building my network out, whether it was contract manufacturers or packaging partners, fragrance houses, consultants, regulatory partners. I really was intentional about doing that for a couple of reasons. One, it never hurts. And two, I felt like a good move for me at some point was going to be independent consulting. I just didn't know when it was going to be. So in 2024, I had kind of been like toying with the idea, probably like the summer of 2024. And so I'm a vision boarder. So I started vision boarding about what I wanted my 2025 to look like. And I'm a big manifester too. So I kind of wrote these really big dreams and goals for 2025 and was excited about what how the year was going to unfold. So, my one of my 2025 goals was to step out and kind of make that leap into consulting. Didn't know how I was going to do it. Hadn't even like built out the framework for it. It was just like this like pipe dream that I had for like a second and I was like, "Okay, we're going to throw it in there and we'll like see how it goes. We'll fill it out. We'll start building some framework for it, do some research, make sure that I was like very diligent in planning that because financial security is really important to me, like it is to all of us. I so that was part of my 2025 vision board. So if I take us back to this phone call, yes, I was laid off that day. So that was at the end of April of 2025. And I think my takeaway from that was one, I was a little shocked, but not shocked. And two, I saw some positivity in that. I saw an opportunity there. I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be, but I am also somebody who tries to like see the positive in everything. So I was like, okay, maybe this was the nudge that I needed because I do feel like I've had so many conversations with people in the industry that may not be happy with whatever it is that they're doing, but they're so comfortable because the paycheck is consistent and they know what's expected of them day in and day out. There's really no question about it. It may not be comfortable, they may not like it, they may be pretty unhappy for the most part, but I think we are creatures of habit and we tend to stay in places that feel very comfortable and safe for what it is, even if we are miserable. Now, I will say I was not miserable to any extent. I loved my job. I have always loved my job. I've always loved what I've done. And I've always been so appreciative about the opportunities that I've been given and the trust that has been instilled to me to be able to deliver for the brands and the partners that I've worked with over time. And so my takeaway from this phone call was, wow, okay. But also like, okay, what am I supposed to do now? What is ahead for me? And I was very intentional in wanting to make sure that I took a little bit of time to process what had just happened. Because even though my takeaway was very positive, I also wanted to make sure that in conversations, I wasn't going to speak poorly about this particular brand because I knew that it wasn't personal. I knew that it was a business decision. But like there's always a part of your ego that's like, "Well, why was I the chosen one and why wasn't it somebody else?" When I think in my mind and in my heart, I think like what makes me better than anybody else that like I can't get laid off, but somebody else can. So I did look at it from the perspective of this is going to be an incredible opportunity for me. And I wanted to make sure that conversations that I was having post layoff were going to be very focused on staying positive and not speaking ill about the brand that had laid me off, because I hold them so highly that I wanted to make sure that I was being very respectful to the opportunities that they gave me. And so I took about a week to process the information and like really come to terms with it. And then sort of start figuring out what my next move was going to be. I knew before this layoff that 2025, like I said, was going to be a year that I was going to step out into consulting. But I really wanted to have those conversations with contract manufacturers and brands so that I could really understand, gut check them and understand, like, how do you feel about working with consultants? What are your expectations? Is there a preference to work with consultants over employees? Like, really have a very clear understanding as best as I could about whether or not there was going to be success in this for me, because I wasn't really sure. And so I did not really have a chance to quite do that. I had just started having those conversations and probably had only spoken with like maybe four, maybe five potentials before this happened. So what I decided to do was that I was just gonna like pull the trigger, right? So when I was laid off, I mean, I received a severance, which I think helped cushion the financial blow a little bit, helped to give me a little bit of time to prepare and start doing some outreach and see like where I could get plugged in. And I'm somebody who like moves at a very fast pace. I don't like to sit still. If I have if I have a thought or a dream or something that I want to pursue, I usually jump on it pretty quickly. I don't usually let things like linger and marinate and do all of that. I usually move pretty quickly. So I would say it was after about a week and a half that I made the decision to just pull the trigger and do it, because I saw it from a couple of different perspectives. I saw it from a perspective of I had already been preparing to consult for a little while. So my mind was already down that road. So it wasn't a huge leap for me. I had a very strong network. I have a very strong network, and I've worked really hard to make sure that I'm dialed in with my network, and that people know me well. They understand what I do, what I'm capable of doing. They understand the quality of my work and my determination and my commitment to things. And so I knew that that was dialed in. I am very good at processes. So at my previous brands, I had done a lot of process building, a lot of like SOP building. So I definitely knew how I was going to start to kind of like build out this business for myself. And then I took a day and built my website and, started brainstorming about what I was going to do. And then I started reaching out to some of my contacts. And I have to tell you, the response was incredibly positive. It was incredibly and overwhelmingly supportive. And I mean, I had people in my network say to me like, "Christina, babe, like we've been waiting for this day, waiting for you to like consult." And I was like, "Really?" So I was like, "Well, I'm here for you. So let's do this. Like, let's pull the trigger and let's make things happen." That's kind of how it started. It happened very quickly, but I also was very upfront about the conversations I was having. I created my website. I took a step back to think about, like, you have to think about your skills and you have to think about what you are knowledgeable about and where you're still growing. And you have to be willing to talk about yourself, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And you have to be able to have good, strong conversations, right? Because people are going to ask you questions about the services that you offer, and you have to be able to have an answer. If you don't know how to do something, you have to be comfortable saying, "I don't know how to do that." And also, the really incredible thing about networks is you probably have somebody in your network that you can refer to them. And that's the beauty of networking, is that you can refer somebody who in turn at some point down the road, if all the stars align, they will refer you back when it makes sense. So I think, I mean, that is the whole point about networking, right? Is for us to share our people that are in our circle, people who have stronger skills than we do in particular areas, to be able to refer them and to refer their services. And it's really a beautiful thing when you embrace it and you don't try to just like handle everything yourself. So, anyways, I reached out to my network and it was really beautifully overwhelming. So I thought about, like I said, when I was building my website, I thought about like all the things that I've done over the course of my career. And I tried to look at things like nothing was too small, nothing was too big. I just kind of like thought about everything. And it was really interesting because I think you don't really realize all the things that you have learned over the course of your career because you don't think about it, right? We're like living in the day to day, we're doing the daily tasks and those things grow and new things are introduced and you assimilate different tasks or experiences and things like that that you don't realize how much experience you're starting to stack up over a period of time. So it was really interesting when I kind of was starting to go through my experiences and realized really how much knowledge I really had about so many different things. And it really goes back to just my absolute appreciation for the brands that I worked with in the past, because it was really because of them that I know so much. It was because they trusted me to support them. And in a lot of ways, when I first started with that first brand, I was so green. I knew very little. I mean, granted, yes, I was a licensed esthetician, but like from a brand perspective, I was learning everything from the ground up. And I remember it wasn't very long that I had been with them when we were starting to go into like big retailers like Walmart and then Target and HSN and things like that. And when you do that, you learn how to register products in like retailer portals and things like that, which I did not know how to do. But you bet your bottom that I figured out how to do it. I called the right people. I learned. I didn't act like I knew everything. If I didn't know something, I figured it out. I navigated a website. I called customer service. I became very good friends with Retail Link. I mean, I had him on speed dial to like walk me through how to like get these products registered. And he was wonderful. A little shout out to Mr. Godfrey Day, who was a key component into making my Retail Link life so much easier. But for me, it was really about not saying no to anything and being willing to do whatever I needed to do to learn more, be a true asset to these brands. And I just did it because I knew one day that all of that knowledge accumulated was really going to be good for me. However, I was going to use it, right? Like back in 2014, I had no idea. But I knew that it was going to pay off at some point down the road. I looked at all of my knowledge and all of my experience and figured out how to offer services that would cover all of those things. They're all services that I offer in my consulting at like a flat hourly rate, and or I have retainer tiers set up just depending on the commitment level that clients might need. Did that. And it was really like surprising when I put it together. I was like, whoa, honey, like you know a lot of stuff. So I pat myself on the back for a minute and then, you just keep moving because you don't want to get stuck there and you want to stay humble. So built my website and then started putting together my packets for my deck. I put a deck together, like a pitch deck that I was pitching out to contract manufacturers and, figuring out how to support them because you look at your skills, like I've been talking about, and from a contract manufacturer's role, I think about like how could a consultant with my knowledge and experience from the brand side, what can I bring to a contract manufacturer? From the brand side, we work with contract manufacturers all day. That's all we do, depending on your role with a brand. I work with contract manufacturers all the time. I worked with packaging partners, both domestically and internationally, all the time. But from a contract manufacturer's perspective, I think from the brand side, what was missing the most was the fact that from the brand's perspective, at least the brands that I was working with, we were never pitched like true innovation that was specific to our brand. And so when I looked at it from a consultant perspective, I thought to myself, what kind of value can I bring to a contract manufacturer? And so what I pitched to them was what was missing from my perspective from the brand side, which was having a contract manufacturer audit our website, look at what we're offering, look at the competitive landscape, and tell us from their perspective what's missing. And then one step beyond that is okay, tell us what we're missing because what we're missing, we're losing money on, right? And we're missing an opportunity because there's a gap there. And so, one step beyond that is auditing the website, looking at it from like a competitive landscape, telling us what's missing. And then, one step beyond that is pitch to us something that falls within what makes sense for the brand and the portfolio that fills that gap, but also levels up on it, right? So, contract manufacturers are constantly being pitched by raw material suppliers, innovation, incredible technology. Like what ingredient right now is trending and or in your conversations with raw material suppliers are they talking to you about? That's like on the horizon, right? Like it's not even out yet, but it's something that they're working on. And that particular ingredient could really level us up on that new innovative product. That is what I feel was missing from contract manufacturer pitches. What I had experienced was contract manufacturers pitching us products and marketing ingredients that they're essentially pitching to a lot of other brands. And it fit our portfolio, but it didn't really feel like it was curated for us. What did feel like was curated for us was packaging, right? Like they would create renders that were specific to our brand, which I did appreciate, right? Like I know that CMs and their marketing teams, they put a lot of time and effort behind the pitches that they send us. I just felt from my perspective, and this is a personal opinion, what I was missing that I would have really appreciated and loved receiving from a contract manufacturer was exactly what I described. Audit our website, look at the competitive landscape, tell us where we're missing opportunities, and then pitch to me a leveled up, elevated option. We haven't thought about that angle yet. And so I just would have loved for CMs to take that approach. So I started talking with contract manufacturers and pitching that. And I got to tell you, like, they were all about it. And the way that I did that was I took one particular brand and I did exactly that. I audited it. I looked at the competitive landscape. I pitched to the contract manufacturer where I personally, from another brand's perspective, looking at it through those lenses and saying, like, look, this is what I see this brand is missing out on opportunity. And didn't do a lot about the packaging, right? It was really about formulas and where I felt they were like missing opportunities and did that. And that was very well received. And then I started talking with brands. And I got to tell you too, like I will always go back to networking because my network is so strong and so incredibly supportive that I have been able to build my consulting business based on word of mouth only. I have not marketed anything. I have not done anything more than just maybe had a couple of conversations or a number of conversations with people within my network. And then they talk to somebody, and then that somebody contacts me or that brand contacts me. And then we have a conversation about what their needs are, how I can assist them. And so it's been such an incredible blessing for me. So I will always go back to the importance of working with your network and building your network. So that was my approach to contract manufacturers. As far as brands are concerned, I work with a handful of really incredible brands, and it's been an incredible blessing. I will tell you, there are pros and cons, of course, to being a consultant. There is not as much financial security. And I think that really is going to come down to the way that you organize your pitches and your retainers or your contracts or however you tend to build those out. I built out my contracts in a way that provides a somewhat short-term, potential long-term partnership. I try to understand from the client's perspective how long they might need my services. In a lot of cases, they may not know. They'll have a budget, usually like a monthly budget or like an overall project budget. But the way that I approach financials is when I have a contract signed by a client, and if I have an opportunity to understand how long this contract is going to last, I start having conversations with potential clients a few months out from the expiration of a particular contract. That way, you're starting to overlap your contracts a little bit so that there's not any lapse in your financials. So, and that's again why you want to depend on your network, because you want to have these conversations. And you can have a conversation with somebody, and let's say they don't have the budget yet. That's fine. But then you try to understand, okay, when do you think you'll have the budget? Because if they understand the services that you offer, they can figure out how to budget you in. And that time may not be today, right? It may not be until the next calendar year or the next fiscal year. It may not be until the fall, depending on when they do new product launches. Whatever the situation is, I tend to have those conversations earlier rather than later, so that I can understand what their needs are, when those needs are going to be required, and then, help them understand what kind of budget they would need to set aside for. I will tell you, my heart is with emerging brands. I feel like I've learned over the course of my time in the industry that I am someone who has a heart for building things. So I prefer to work with smaller startup brands. Now, with that being said, obviously, startup brands have a lower budget to work with. And so I've been able to creatively work around that in different ways. But that's where my heart is. My heart is in building things and providing really strong product development support to those kinds of brands, because I get it. Like, I also started my day spa like straight out of school, like literally after I was licensed. I had this dream. Everybody has a dream, and every brand starts from somewhere. And I want to be a part of helping somebody's dream come true. And that's where my heart is. That's where my passion is. Now, that tends to mean that you are not able to charge as much as other consultants out there, consultants who choose to work with larger or like mid to larger companies. And I think that's amazing. Like, look, I have such an incredible respect for consultants across the board, because it is not easy, guys. Like, you really put yourself out there. And I have such an incredible amount of respect for consultants and independent contractors who are just out here like trying to live life and live life to the fullest and make their dreams come true, and be entrepreneurs and all of that stuff. And there's a place for everybody. Believe me, there's a place for everybody. My heart is in building. And so that for me, that means working with emerging brands, working with startups, understanding that they have a lower budget to work with. And like I said, I creatively work around that so that I can provide them the kind of support that they need. And I'm good with that. Not only that, but I'm also somebody who just has a heart for people too. And if you know me, you know what I mean. I will be your ride or die every day and any day of the week, no matter what. And so I started this consulting business in May of 2025. And I will tell you that my workload right now is so overwhelming that I have had to hire two additional independent contractors to help support me with the workload that I have. And that's a huge blessing for somebody who has launched a consulting business in under a year in business. And I certainly don't take it for granted. I'm thankful every day for the fact that one, I have one client, two, that I have multiple clients, three, that I am so busy that I feel quite overwhelmed in a way that I need to hire help which is an absolute crazy thought, but it's such a huge blessing for me. But I guess what I'm trying to say is there is incredible opportunity out there. And I think it really is about what I've experienced is that it's about knowing what you're good at, believing in yourself, knowing that you can do it, while also, having a conversation with your inner circle, right? The people who are going to be directly affected. So for some, that's going to be their family, right? You've got a partner, you've got kids. And when you're launching your own business, it takes quite a bit of focus to get it started and get it off the ground and, keep it thriving. I had a conversation with my family about it because I knew it was going to monopolize my time to an extent. And, thankfully, my family has been incredibly supportive. But yeah, it's a commitment for sure, like everything is, but it really is an incredible commitment. And having a really strong support system is really important. So, when I talked earlier about bringing on help, what I wanted to also mention is not only do I have a heart for new companies and emerging brands, but I also have a heart for mentoring. So I hired two independent contractors who have foundational experience, but will give me an opportunity to mentor them in the industry, mentor them in the things that I know, and help them to build their experience. They are individuals that are excited about the skincare industry and they really want to grow in that experience. And that's where my heart is versus maybe hiring somebody with a lot of experience in the industry. I feel like the first brand that hired me took a chance on me and it really paid off for me. And I want to be able to pay that forward. And that's really important to me too, to believe in people and to give them opportunities that may not be given to them otherwise. So I really wanted to be able to give opportunities to people who were excited and passionate about this industry and give me an opportunity to mentor them and give them a side seat experience into helping build really incredible brands. And that is something I'm really excited about. So that is what my team looks like right now. That's how I choose to build my team. Everybody chooses differently. That's where my heart is. I think when you have your own business, you tend to sort of weave in your own personality and the things that are important to you and, build it based on that. And so that's what I'm doing. The other thing that I decided to do was in an effort to be like very strategic and also another way to give back is I launched Beauty Confidential podcast in January of this year. And Beauty Confidential podcast was an idea that an industry colleague and very good friend of mine, LMA, and I we had kind of like spitballed like a couple of different things that we felt the industry needed based on the experiences that we had to offer and things like that. And one of them was a roundtable event where we wanted to bring people together. And the Mazer Group does such an incredible job with their roundtables. And, I have attended their roundtable event and it was amazing. Highly recommend it to anybody who is looking to really become knowledgeable about the different avenues within the industry. They've got, leaders that lead conversations at each of the roundtables. And it's just an incredible event. I think it's offered once a year. So check her out, but highly recommend it for sure. So Salome and I had talked about roundtabling with various partners from contract manufacturers to packaging partners to, legal and regulatory and things like that, and how we were going to build and curate those tables out. And then we thought about like the cost involved in all of that. So we were trying to get creative about like how do we reach a larger audience without having like this huge like upfront price tag. And so podcasting came to mind and we kind of thought about like what would we offer in a podcast? What do we have to offer? Do we have anything to offer? Do we know what the hell we're doing? And we really settled into our experiences and our passion in the industry and really what the podcast would be used to do. And going back to my network, which I will forever do. But when I go back to my network, I think about like all of the really strong and incredible relationships and partnerships that I have with all the people in my network, right? So with some people in my network, I have a stronger connection with, and some I'm in the process of building that relationship with. But when I think about contract manufacturers that I know, when I think about packaging partners, both domestic and international, when I think about raw material suppliers, and these are people that I meet either, they hit me up on LinkedIn, I meet them at events, right? Because I go to as many events as I can during the year, whether it's Cosmoprof, LuxPack, Makeup in LA, Makeup in New York, LuxPack New York, Cosmoprof in Italy, and like all these different events that we have, Natural Products Expo West, like all of these different events that we have in the industry that can be really incredibly beneficial if you use them in that way. But I thought what I felt was missing where we were having so many conversations in the industry about various things, right? Whether they were things that we were frustrated about or things that were working great or like what was missing or whatever it was, right? So I thought to myself, I have such an incredible network and I have such an incredible relationship with those in my network that, like, why don't we have these conversations with the right people instead of having these sort of lateral and parallel conversations with people who aren't experts in that particular thing, but we all had an opinion about it based on whatever our experiences were. And so I thought, well, I guess what we're missing is inviting the main voice in the topic to the conversation. Invite them to the table. Let's talk to them directly about what's happening, why is it happening, how's it affecting you, what's on the horizon, like what's coming, what's happening. So that's with, like I mentioned, contract manufacturers and formulations, it's with private chemists, it's with packaging partners, raw material suppliers, it's about technology, it's about AI, it's about devices, it's about like the sky is the limit. It's about trends, it's about influencers and how social media influences purchasing power. It's about so many things that we are having conversations with our like direct colleagues, and we're not having these conversations with the right experts. And so Beauty Confidential Conversations from the Lounge was really born out of wanting to bring those voices to the table. I feel like we've done a really good job at that. We talked about tariffs, and I think what I wanted to and I think that was like episode 2 or 3 or something. But we talked about it was really important for me because I think as US brands, we looked at things from a more of a reactive state when the tariffs shifted. And we were like reactive, we were panicking, we wanted to pull work from overseas and start manufacturing here domestically. I had a lot of conversations with brands about the fact that the US right now doesn't have the infrastructure set up to support the kind of demand that they would need if we were to pull all of this production from overseas and bring it to the US. Not to mention a lot of those raw materials are coming from overseas. So I really wanted to give a voice to a China supplier, for example, because I think that we're affected, yes, but they're also affected. And I think I had direct communications with China suppliers who were like, look, we will take the hit. We don't want to lose your business. We will take the hit, at least at this stage, and we will, for example, reduce costs to balance out the cost of the tariffs. Like they were willing to work with brands to make sure that they didn't lose the business, depending on, how long term the tariffs were going to affect business. But I really wanted to give them a voice and give them an opportunity to share their side of it and talk about how they were affected because everybody is affected regardless of where they're located. So Beauty Confidential talks, it introduces AI and conversations around AI and beauty. And that was something that I learned a lot about when I had that conversation with Raviv. And, I continue to learn things. I think as a podcast host, my job is not to know everything. It's to facilitate the conversation because they're also incredible learning experiences for me too. But Beauty Confidential podcast was also created as a way to not only, first and foremost, it was created to have these conversations with the right people. But what I also learned in the early stages of creating this podcast was it could also be an incredible marketing tool for my consulting business as well, because I use it to drive business to my consulting firm. So, Creative Solutions Consulting, it has an an advertisement message at the beginning of each of the podcasts. And it really helps to drive business to the consulting side of things. So I think you can be very strategic in the way that you do things if you just take a step back and think about how you want to implement things. Think about your time, think about your bandwidth, because that's really important too. And I talked earlier about the fact that business has been incredibly strong for me. And so I've had to hire some help, which is a huge blessing. But you have to think about too, like if you're somebody who likes to control everything, it can be really difficult for you to bring on help because you have to figure out how to delegate, which is hard for me. but but I mean, the whole point is to delegate so that it takes the pressure off of you. You have to figure out what you want to delegate and what makes sense for you. But I think that that's one thing that you need to consider too. And you have to be honest with yourself about a couple of things. Your experience, like I said, what you're bringing to the table, your mindset, it requires a mindset shift. When you think about consulting, like I said, and will always say, your network is incredibly important. And I think you should lean on your network because you'd be surprised how your network will come through for you. I also wanted to talk just a moment about the fact that consulting is not for everybody. I think when you're a business owner, you need to be somebody who can work well on your own, who aren't going to have anybody that's setting structure for you, that is supervising you, and that's driving your time and ensuring that you're getting things done. Like you have to be a very structured and organized person to be able to track all of that. There are pros and cons, right? Obviously. Some of the pros are, you've got flexibility, but I would say you don't have a lot of flexibility. You have flexibility. I mean, it works if you have a family, maybe because kids are in school and maybe you've got doctor's appointments or whatever. So there's a little bit of flexibility there, where it may be a little bit more difficult if you were an employee somewhere, depending on how flexible they are with you. You certainly have control over your projects. You have control over the clients that you choose and clients that you feel you may not be a good match for. So you do have some options around that versus as an employee, you are just assigned projects and you're assigned clients or things like that. So, there are some pros there. You have the capability as a business owner and a consultant to scale your income. And that really happens when you start to onboard employees, which then allows you to take on more clients. Right now, I'm like at my cap. I can't take any more clients than the ones that I have because I only have so many hours in a day and I need to commit time to all of my clients. And so onboarding to employees or to contractors gives me the ability to hand off a portion of those projects while still staying very close to them because they signed on with me so that I could lead their projects for them. But so these contractors will help take sort of a portion of those and still be a part of the conversation, a part of obviously the projects. And, again, this is a learning experience for them because they're being mentored. So that is a really beautiful experience for everybody, for me as an owner and also for them, as well as giving my clients the opportunity to be a part of the growth experience for these newer contractors in the industry. And then you've got, of course, creative ownership, right? Like you can figure out how you want to own and operate and how your day-to-day is created. Some of the cons of doing this are you are wearing multiple hats, which in my experience, it's kind of always what I've done. So it's not really anything new there for me. But just as an FYI, you do end up having to wear multiple hats, at least at this stage in my consulting, which I feel like if you're just considering consulting or you're just starting out, maybe you'll see that. But I think it's good to talk about because it's like a true reality. Lack of team. When you're first starting out, it's just you, yourself, and you, honey. So you have to be very disciplined and be able to set boundaries with your clients because some clients may push the boundaries. You'll get text messages before 8 a.m. Sometimes you'll get them at 6 a.m. Sometimes you'll get them at 9 p.m. And so you have a choice to answer those or to set your phone to silent, or you have a conversation with them and be very clear about your boundaries. And here's what I will say about that. Founders of emerging brands, they don't mean to operate outside of like basic boundaries, but they have their brand on their mind 24/7. So they can't stop thinking about it. So they text you when they think about it. So you have a choice whether to respond or not. Like I said, you can put your phone on silent and address it in the morning and or have a conversation with them and just maybe just ask them, "Hey, would you mind just like putting it in an email and then just dropping it to me or scheduling it to send like at 8 a.m. the next morning? That way my phone's not going off and it's not interrupting my family time or like whatever however you want to set that up." But consulting is not for everyone, and owning a business is not for everyone. Like I said, it takes discipline, it takes structure, it takes even setting your own personal boundaries about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, having a conversation with your family. If you have kids, if you have a partner, having a conversation with them and being very realistic about how that first year is going to feel. But I also think that here I am, what are we? Almost, oh my gosh, it's almost a year. I have to celebrate. That's crazy. I try to be very intentional about my time with my kids. And so I have my youngest is 10. I have 5 kids. My 4 older kids are adults now. So nobody's trying to cuddle with me anymore. My 10-year-old, yes. So I still get my cuddle time in with her. So sometimes I'll work late, but I will stop working so that I can make dinner for my family, so that I can sit and have dinner with them. So that if they want to have a movie night, we sit and have a movie night. And then I'll be honest with you, when everybody falls asleep, I'm going to come back up to my office and probably work because anything that doesn't get finished today is going to roll into tomorrow's work. And tomorrow has a full laundry list of things that I need to get done. And so rolling today's work into tomorrow does not work for me. But what I can tell you is when I sleep, honey, I'm out. So I don't have a problem sleeping. When my body is ready to shut down, it shuts down and it doesn't pick back up until the morning. And I sleep like a queen. And I am good with that. So I know that there was a ton of information that was shared in this podcast, but I do feel like given everything that's been happening in the industry and a lot of changes that I've been seeing happening with layoffs and like I said, restructuring, I felt like it was very timely to talk about it because I also had people reach out to me who were just like considering consulting and they're like, what do you think about it? Like, how did you do it? Like all of these things. And so I just felt like I don't know. I haven't seen anybody post about transitioning from being an employee to being an independent consultant. And so I figured, like, why not? Why not? This podcast is about teaching, it's about giving answers to those unanswered questions and even like the questions that you had but you didn't know you had, so maybe you didn't even know that you wanted to consider consulting and you just come across this podcast and it's incredibly helpful to you, then that was my goal. So in closing, sometimes the biggest risk isn't stepping out on your own, honestly. It's staying somewhere that no longer challenges or supports your growth. And I think that's really important because the way that I look at things is I'm always growing and learning and excelling. And that's how I want to live my life. And so the choices that I make are always in support of that. And so if any of you out there are considering making a shift, feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to give you any advice. My disclaimer is what works for me may not work for everybody, but just consider all of the pros and all of the cons and make the decision that is in your best interest. But I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody. If you are a consultant, and even if you have a full consulting firm, I would love to hear from you. I am a huge supporter of the consultant community, meaning that like I am here to be your hype girl all day, every day. And I would love for the same reciprocation because I think that we're a small but mighty community and we really are all here to just love and be there to encourage each other. And that's what I am here to do. And that's what I strive to do. So I know that making changes can be uncomfortable. In my case, it was a change that wasn't necessarily by choice. It was forced on me, but I also feel like I was starting to move in that direction anyways. So it ended up being like that sneaky blessing that I needed. It was that nudge that I needed. And I gotta tell you, it was one of the best things that's happened to me in quite some time. So you just never know the blessings that come from what could have been a really incredibly upsetting time. This looks different for everybody. Change looks different for everybody. It feels different for everybody. So I would just encourage you to pray about it, think about it, like I said, weigh the pros and cons and talk to your family, talk to those that are closest to you. If you're thinking about consulting, talk to a consultant and hear from them firsthand, pros and cons, because there are a lot of things that you have to think about, right? You got to think about like insurance and your 401k and like all the things that come with being an employee. You don't really necessarily have those benefits so readily available to you as a consultant. Those are things that you have to take care of on your own, which you can totally 100% do. It just takes a little bit more effort. But yeah, you can totally do it. So, what I would say is reach out to me. And I am happy to, again, share any additional experiences with you. I'm here to just encourage you um, and wish you nothing but the absolute best in everything that you do. Thank you for spending time with me and hanging out with me today. I hope that today's podcast was incredibly helpful and educational for you. And until next time, stay beautiful, stay strong, and stay informed. Beauty Confidential out. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this conversation, it's that there isn't one right path, only the path that aligns with where you are and where you want to go. Starting a consulting business can be incredibly rewarding, but it also requires intention, resilience, and a willingness to step into uncertainty. It's not just about having the skill set, it's about building something that reflects your value, your perspective, and the way you want to show up in this industry. If you're navigating a transition right now, know that you are not alone and that sometimes the most unexpected shifts can lead to the most meaningful growth. If this episode resonated with you, I would love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear it. Share your comments as well as your own experiences. Whether you're a consultant who took that leap or is still weighing the pros and cons, I'd also love to hear from consultants who did take the step and what worked for them as well. Building a strong consultant community that supports and lifts each other up is so important and something that I'm excited to be a part of. As always, thank you for being a part of these conversations. And until next time, stay confident, stay open, stay strong, and keep building your path forward. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a colleague or anyone who could benefit from hearing the perspective of a global partner. This conversation offered a truly unique and eye-opening look at the realities shaping our industry today. Join me next time for another powerful behind-the-scenes conversation, this time from a domestic operations and supply chain perspective. We'll unpack how U.S. brands are navigating global shifts from current domestic infrastructure and the realities of moving manufacturing closer to home, to margin pressure, compliance, and the operational decisions that ultimately shape a brand's growth. It's another candid conversation helping define the future of beauty. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and stay beautiful.